Winning and losing is part of the fight game. Many times fighters have lost in a devastating fashion where they rose to the occasion and became world champions. Everyone deals with losses in a different way. For some, it motivates them to make changes and achieve big things, and for some, it can be the complete opposite. Going through a loss can be a very difficult time. It can be challenging and very hard to overcome. All fighters put their heart and soul into their training camps, and when they don't come out on top, it can have an impact on a fighter's career. In the UFC, we've seen the unthinkable happen, where a fight can end in a flash, or a fighter can be robbed from a victory by the judges. There have been moments where certain fighters couldn't hold back their emotions after a loss, and it was captured for the world to see. So for this video, I will be talking about the 10 most heartbreaking defeats in the UFC. Number 10. BJ Penn. Back in 2014, BJ Penn announced that he was making a comeback and was set to face Frankie Edgar for the third time at the Ultimate Fighter 19 finale. He was coming back to start fresh and to start a run in the featherweight division. He was coming off 2 losses to Nick Diaz at UFC 137 and to Rory McDonald at UFC on Fox 5. BJ Penn was returning to face the man who had defeated him twice already. BJ Penn had lost his UFC lightweight title to Frankie Edgar in the first fight by a unanimous decision at UFC 112. He would next lose the immediate rematch to Frankie Edgar again by a unanimous decision at UFC 118. In their third fight, Frankie Edgar absolutely battered BJ Penn from pillar to post, eventually finishing him by TKO in the third round. BJ Penn was heartbroken, he was bruised and bloodied up, and in his post-fight interview, he decided to retire from the sport once again. Number 9. Junior Dos Santos. After defeating Shane Carwin at UFC 131, Junior Dos Santos earned his title shot and was set to face then reigning heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez at UFC on Fox 1, where he would win the fight by knockout in the first round, becoming the new UFC heavyweight champion of the world. Cain Velasquez would make a comeback and would absolutely maul Antonio Bigfoot Silva at UFC 146 and was given a rematch with Junior Dos Santos at UFC 155. Cain would go on to absolutely punish Junior Dos Santos over the course of the 5 rounds, where the damage done was clearly evident on Junior Dos Santos' face. After 5 grueling rounds, the unanimous decision was given to Cain Velasquez, who became the new UFC heavyweight champion of the world. Junior Dos Santos was absolutely dominated throughout the 5 rounds. He had his face beaten to a bloody pulp, and it was definitely a heartbreaking loss. Number 8. George St Pierre. After defeating Matt Hughes at UFC 65, George St Pierre had become the UFC welterweight champion of the world, and his first title defense would be against Matt Serra at UFC 69. Matt Serra would do the unthinkable and finish GSP in a brutal manner in the first round, shocking the world. GSP looked emotional in his post-fight interview. He was absolutely broken from the inside, but done his best to keep his emotions intact. GSP would go on to dominate Josh Koscheck at UFC 74, and next defeated Matt Hughes for the interim UFC welterweight title by an armbar in the second round. At UFC 79, GSP earned the opportunity to take revenge against the man who took away his title at UFC 83. He would go on to absolutely demolish Matt Serra, eventually finishing him by TKO in the second round. GSP would go on to defend his title 9 times and would win the UFC middleweight title at UFC 217. Number 7. Alexander Gustafsson. After defeating Jimmy Manuwa in an electrifying way at UFC Final 37, Alexander Gustafsson lined himself up for another title shot as he was set to face Anthony Rumble Johnson in a number 1 contenders fight at UFC on Fox 14. With the win, he would most likely earn another title shot at then champion John Jones. Alexander Gustafsson pushed John Jones to the absolute limit, where many thought he had won the fight at UFC 165. This fight was set in Alexander Gustafsson's backyard, and his own people expected him to do well. With almost 30,000 people in the arena, Alexander Gustafsson had added pressure to perform on the night, but unfortunately things wouldn't go his way. He would get viciously knocked out in the first round. Alexander Gustafsson looked very upset and emotional after the fight, as he wasn't able to pull off a win in his home country. This scene was very heartbreaking to see, as he had a disastrous night in front of his home people. Number 6. Anthony Johnson. After putting together a string of knockouts over Jimmy Manuwa, Ryan Bader and Glover Teixeira, Anthony Johnson had earned himself another title shot at then UFC light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. Both fighters fought for the vacant UFC light heavyweight title at UFC 187, where Anthony Johnson would get outworked and finish by a rear naked choke in the third round. Anthony Johnson's winning streak showed that he was a different fighter, and many thought that he had a very good chance of holding UFC light heavyweight gold. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Anthony Johnson looked very hesitant to engage and tried wrestling an Olympian, but it backfired on him, resulting him in losing the fight by submission via a rear naked choke in the second round. After the fight, we saw a very emotional Anthony Johnson who had failed to secure UFC gold for the second time. He looked completely heartbroken and didn't shy away from showing his true emotions. The fight didn't go as he planned, and in his post-fight interview, he announced his retirement from the sport. Number 5. Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has come a long way since moving up from the featherweight division to the lightweight division. He has grown as a fighter over the years and has established himself as a true contender in the weight class with his dominant performances. After racking up 5 consecutive wins, with his last victory coming over then featherweight champion Max Holloway at UFC 236, Dustin Poirier had become the UFC interim lightweight champion and was next scheduled to unify his title against UFC champion Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 242. In the fight, Khabib would use his wrestling to dominate Dustin on the ground, where in the third round he would lose the fight by a rear naked choke. This loss would be very hurtful to Dustin Poirier, as he had literally started from the bottom and worked his way through the rankings the hard way to earn himself a title shot. He had been through quite a lot to his journey to a title shot, and he couldn't keep his emotions together. Number 4. Cat Zingano. After defeating Amanda Nunes in a very violent way at UFC 178, Cat Zingano earned herself a title shot at then UFC Women's Bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey at UFC 184. Ronda Rousey had looked like a phenom whilst as the champion, where she had put together 10 wins with 10 finishes under her record. She had finished everyone in her MMA career and just looked unbeatable. Cat Zingano on the other hand came into this fight undefeated and looked very hungry to win the title. Cat Zingano's fighting style was very different to what Ronda Rousey had faced, and she was looked at as a potential fighter to cause the upset. Unfortunately for Cat Zingano, she would lose to Ronda Rousey in just 14 seconds of the first round. After the fight, Cat Zingano felt embarrassed and was just so heartbroken that the fight ended so quickly. All the hard work she put in over the years had just resulted in her losing in 14 seconds. The look on Cat Zingano's face said it all, and it was definitely one of the most heartbreaking defeats in the UFC. Number 3. Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva's 11th title defense was set to be against Chris Weidman at UFC 162. Anderson Silva had cleared out the middleweight division impressively and was regarded as the greatest fighter at that time. Chris Weidman, who was an undefeated hungry challenger, had risen through the rankings, defeating top names at that time. At UFC 162, Chris Weidman would shock the world and would knock out Anderson Silva in the second round, becoming the new UFC middleweight champion of the world. An immediate rematch was put in place, where we saw a motivated Anderson Silva show up to reclaim his title. However, in the second round of the fight, Anderson Silva would break his leg after Chris Weidman checked it, and it was one of the most devastating injuries to happen in the sport. After years of holding the UFC middleweight title, building up the winning streak, defeating all the top challengers, moving up in weight class, it was definitely a devastating way to lose. Anderson Silva would first lose by KO and then would break his leg in the rematch. It is one of the most heartbreaking defeats to happen in the UFC. Number 2. Daniel Cormier. John Jones and Daniel Cormier have never seen eye to eye since they first met each other. Their rivalry further escalated after both fighters were involved in an altercation prior to their first fight at UFC 182. When both fighters met inside of the octagon, John Jones would be one step ahead of Daniel Cormier to win the fight by unanimous decision. They would meet for the second time at UFC 214 2 years later, where this time Daniel Cormier held the UFC light heavyweight title. In the fight, both fighters fought a very closely contested fight until John Jones would land a head kick in the third round, stunning Daniel Cormier. Things would go downhill from there for DC, as he would stumble across the octagon and get finished by knockout, losing his title. This loss absolutely broke Daniel Cormier, and he couldn't hide his emotions. He was absolutely devastated. He had held the UFC light heavyweight title, defended it, and this was the first time he had ever been finished in his professional career. He couldn't avenge his only loss at that time and was just heartbroken. This has to be one of the most heartbreaking defeats in the UFC. Number 1. Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo's 8th title defense was set to be against Conor McGregor, who had been outspoken whilst his quick rise towards the top. He would talk trash about his opponents and then deliver on his words in a spectacular way. Conor McGregor tried his best to get under Jose Aldo's skin, where as the fight came closer and closer, we could see that Jose Aldo started to look very irritated. Every time both fighters came near each other, Conor McGregor tried his best to do something to intimidate him. Jose Aldo had never experienced a fighter do this to him, and he could clearly tell that it was bothering him. When both fighters met inside the octagon, the fight ended in a flash with Jose Aldo's title reign ending in just 13 seconds of the first round. Jose Aldo couldn't believe what just happened and tried his best not to show any emotions. He looked heartbroken, where all of the hard work over the years had just come to an abrupt end. This definitely has to be one of the most saddest defeats in the UFC. Honorable mentions. After defeating Jose Aldo in just 13 seconds of the first round at UFC 194, Conor McGregor had now become the new UFC featherweight champion of the world. Conor McGregor was set to face then UFC lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos in a super fight at UFC 197 for the UFC lightweight title. Leading up to the fight, Rafael dos Anjos would injure his foot and would be forced out of the bout. Nate Diaz would step in on short notice and would face Conor McGregor in a welterweight bout in the main event. Conor McGregor would bust Nate up in the first round with hard shots, where in the second round he would get stunned by Nate Nate Diaz and would end up losing the fight by a rear naked choke. This marked Conor McGregor's first loss in his UFC career, but he had just looked unbeatable in his UFC run. Conor McGregor looked devastated and emotional, but kept himself together in the post-fight interview and in the post-fight press conference. This was not only an upset, but it was a very heartbreaking defeat. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we post videos. So that was my video of the 10 most heartbreaking defeats in the UFC. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the section below.